My sister dumped her kids on me for the 10th weekend in a row. When I said I'm not her babysitter, she called our parents. An hour later, 2 police officers were at my door before the pizza I'd ordered even arrived. I want you to sit with the specific geometry of that for a moment. I was standing in my own apartment, still in my work clothes, holding the door open, looking at 2 officers from the 14th precinct who were asking me, calmly, professionally, with the particular neutrality of people who have learned not to form opinions before they have information, about a report of child neglect at this address. I hadn't moved from my apartment in 4 hours. There were no children in my apartment. There had never been any children in my apartment that evening. I said, "Can you tell me who filed the report?" The officer, her badge said Okonkwo, looked at her notepad. "We're not at liberty to discuss that, sir, but we do need to confirm the children are safe." "The children," I said, "are not here. They were never here tonight. There is no one in this apartment but me." They came in, they looked around. They saw exactly what I told them they would see. 1 adult male, 1 half-finished can of soda, a laptop open to a spreadsheet, and 0 children anywhere in any configuration. They apologized for the inconvenience and left. I stood in my doorway after they went and looked down the hall toward the elevator. My sister had been gone for 53 minutes. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 31 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for a regional distribution company, which is work that involves a significant amount of precise documentation, shipment manifests, delivery confirmations, chain of custody records, and which has given me, over 5 years, the particular professional habit of writing things down. This habit is going to matter. Keep it in mind. My sister Dana is 34. She has 7-year-old twins, a boy named Jordan and a girl named Kayla, from a relationship that ended badly 3 years ago. She is not a bad mother in the obvious ways. She loves her kids, she feeds them, she keeps them clothed and enrolled in school, and takes them to doctor appointments, and does the visible, documented labor of parenthood with genuine commitment. What she has been bad at for 3 years with an escalating consistency that I had been slow to name clearly, is treating her brother's life as a separate thing from her own, as a resource she can access, as a backup system she can deploy when her primary system needs a break. I had been the backup system for 3 years, not because I was asked, because I was available, because I live alone, a 1-bedroom apartment in the same building as Dana, 2 floors up, which had seemed convenient when I moved in and had become something else entirely, and because available, in my family's operating vocabulary, means responsible for whatever needs doing. The first few times it was easy to say yes. Jordan and Kayla are good kids. I like them. We have a genuine relationship built over Saturday mornings and occasional overnight stays when Dana genuinely needed the help, and I want to be clear about that because this story is not about resenting my niece and nephew. It is about being treated as a piece of furniture that happens to be shaped like a person. The 10th weekend was a Saturday in October. I had plans, not elaborate plans, a friend's birthday thing, casual, the kind of low-key evening that matters specifically because my weeks are not low-key and I had been looking forward to it. I had told Dana about it 3 days prior. She had said have fun with the ease of someone who had not registered it as information. At 4:47 p.m., she knocked on my door with 2 backpacks. She was already handing them to me before I opened it fully. "You're taking them," she said. "I don't care what you have planned." I looked at the backpacks in my hands, then at Dana, then at Jordan and Kayla, who were standing slightly behind her with the expression of children who have witnessed this scene enough times to have stopped having strong feelings about it. "I'm not your babysitter," I said. Dana went completely still. I want to describe what the next 30 seconds looked like because it was its own kind of information. She didn't argue immediately. She processed, which was unusual, which told me the sentence had landed in a way that previous versions of my reluctance hadn't. Then her face did something I can only describe as deciding. "I'm calling Mom and Dad," she said. "They'll deal with you." She shoved the backpacks back at me. I caught them, reflexively, and she was gone before the elevator doors had fully opened. Jordan looked up at me. "We can wait downstairs," he said. He was 7. He said it with the resigned practicality of someone who has been through this enough times to have developed a protocol. "Come in," I said, "both of you." I got them set up with the tablet and called my friend to cancel. Then I waited to see what deal with you was going to look like. 53 minutes later, I found out. The officers left. I made the kids dinner. Dana did not come back that night. I want to tell you about Jordan and Kayla during those hours because they matter to the story in a way that isn't about drama. Jordan did his homework at my kitchen table without being asked, which told me he'd been doing it somewhere unfamiliar often enough that it had become automatic. Kayla fell asleep on my couch at 8:30 with her shoes still on, which told me she was tired in the chronic, accumulated way of a child whose schedule is inconsistent. I took Jordan's shoes off before he went to sleep too. I took photos of both of them, asleep, time-stamped, not for any sinister reason, because I had already decided, standing in the doorway after the officers left, that I was going to start writing things down. My parents showed up the next morning, not together, in sequence, which suggested coordination. My mother arrived first at 9:15 a.m. My father 15 minutes later, which is how they operate when they've agreed on an outcome and are arriving to deliver it from multiple angles. My mother's arms were crossed before she was fully through the door. "Dana said you left the kids crying on the porch," she said. "That's a lie," I said. I don't think that's accurate, or that's not how I remember it. A lie, because it was one. The kids were in my apartment. Dana dropped them and left. I called and canceled my plans. hands. The police came, which is the part you should be focusing on. My mother waved her hand. The specific hand wave that means you're being technical about something that doesn't require technicality. She's overwhelmed, she said. She needs you. My father sat down on my couch, in the spot Kayla had been sleeping 6 hours earlier, and said, "Marcus, you live alone. You have the time. You have the time." I looked at my father, this man I love, this man who worked double shifts for 15 years to give us opportunities, who understands better than most people what it means to give your time to something that requires it, saying you have the time about his son's life as though it were a surplus available for redistribution. She dropped them without asking, I said, then called the police when I said no. She reported child neglect that wasn't happening to get law enforcement to my door. That's what you're here to talk about, not whether I have time. They left before I could finish. Jordan watched them go from the hallway. "Are you in trouble?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm fine." He thought about this. "Mom gets in trouble sometimes too," he said, in the matter-of-fact way of a 7-year-old reporting a fact, but she says it's always someone else's fault. I sat with that sentence for a while. I opened a folder on my phone that afternoon. I have a system for documentation at work that I applied here wholesale, because documentation is documentation, and the principles don't change based on the subject matter. Dates, times, exact quotes where I could remember them, screenshots of every text, which I had started saving in real time once I understood what the pattern was. I want to show you the texts, because they are their own kind of evidence. "Marcus, they're fine. They have everything they need. Just relax." October 14th, after I texted asking what time she was picking them up. "You're doing so much for them. You should be proud. Stop overreacting." October 15th, after I pointed out she had been gone 20 hours beyond what she'd said. "Can you be the adult for once in your life?" October 21st, after I reminded her I had work the next morning. "Be the adult." From the person who called the police on her brother for saying he wasn't available. I saved all of it. I created a log in a Google Doc that I backed up to both cloud storage and my personal laptop, with timestamps and brief contextual notes. I am a logistics coordinator. I understand that a record without context is harder to use than a record with it. My neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Carla Ramirez, knocked on my door that Wednesday. She is 67, retired, and has lived in this building for 22 years, with the particular awareness of a person who knows her neighbors well and pays attention. She looked at me with eyes that were not unkind, but were tight with something that had been building. "Those babies were alone in the hallway again," she said. "I've seen it 3 times in 2 months. I'm going to start recording." "Please do," I said. She nodded once, like a person confirming a decision already made. She started recording that day, an older Samsung Galaxy that she carried in her cardigan pocket, which she held up with the unhurried confidence of someone who has decided to be a witness and is comfortable with that role. The apartment entry happened on a Thursday. I had worked a 10-hour shift. I had stopped at the grocery store. I came home at 7:22 p.m., carrying 2 bags and my work bag, and I put my key in the lock of my own apartment, and the door swung open before I turned the handle. My television was on. There was pizza, not mine, from a place I don't order from, on my coffee table. Dana was on my couch with her feet on the cushions, scrolling her phone, with Jordan and Kayla on my floor, surrounded by a collection of toys that had not been there this morning. She looked up at me. "Hey," she said. The bags in my hands were heavier than they had been a second ago. "How did you get in?" I asked. "Mom told me where you keep the spare," she said, already turning back to her phone. I stood in my doorway for a long moment. The spare key, the one I kept in a specific location for genuine emergencies. My mother had told Dana where it was without asking me, had treated access to my apartment as information she had the right to share because we are family and family does not have separate things. "Dana," I said, "you need to leave." She looked at me with the specific expression she uses when she has decided I am being unreasonable. "Marcus, I just needed a few hours. I'll be out by 9. I set my grocery bags down. I took out my phone. I photographed the apartment, the pizza, the toys, the couch cushions with her feet on them, the timestamp in the corner of every image. I did this slowly and deliberately and without explaining what I was doing, because explaining would have produced an argument, and I didn't want an argument. I wanted documentation. 9 o'clock, I said, "Then I need the key back." She left at 8:47. She took the kids. She did not give me the key. She left a note on the table in her handwriting, cheerful and untroubled. "Thanks again. I'll bring them next Saturday." The next morning, I called a locksmith. The new locks cost $187. I had them installed by 11 a.m. The locksmith, a man named Paul who had been doing this for 15 years, asked no questions about why I was changing the locks on a unit I clearly lived in. He handed me 3 new keys and left. I put all 3 keys in my own possession. Saturday came. Dana arrived at 6:15 p.m. I know because Mrs. Ramirez's recording shows her entering the building at 6:15, and I know because the pounding on my door started at 6:17, the 2 minutes presumably consumed by the elevator ride up, and the realization that her key no longer worked. The pounding was not a knock. It was the specific, full-fisted impact of someone communicating rage through a door. Her voice in the hallway was at a volume that I am confident the residents of at least 3 adjacent apartments could hear clearly. "You think changing a lock means anything? Open this door." I sat in my kitchen. I did not open the door. I had already, 15 minutes before she arrived, texted my building manager, a man named Doug Ferrara, 12 years managing this building, to let him know there might be a disturbance, and asking him to be aware. Doug had texted back, "I'll keep an ear out. You okay?" Through my my door, I could hear Jordan's voice, then Kayla's. The particular sound children make when they are asking a parent to stop doing something and the parent isn't stopping. The sound of kids who are embarrassed and scared and want the volume to come down. Mrs. Ramirez's door opened. I heard her voice, calm and completely unbothered by the scene in front of her. "You're scaring those children, and I have video of every time they've been left alone out here." Dana's volume somehow increased. Mrs. Ramirez did not flinch. I know this because I could hear her steady presence in the silence between Dana's sentences, the particular quality of calm that belongs to someone who has made a decision and is not reconsidering it. I did not open the door. Dana left at 6:44, according to Mrs. Ramirez's recording. I sat in my kitchen for a while after the noise stopped. The apartment was quiet. The new locks were solid. I thought about Jordan asking me if I was in trouble and Kayla falling asleep with her shoes on and my mother's hand wave, and you have the time. I thought about the folder on my phone. Then I called Doug Ferrara and asked him to formally document the disturbance. He did. Miss Priya Patel called me on a Tuesday morning. She identified herself as a child welfare specialist with the county's Family Services Division. 11 years with the department, she mentioned, in the tone of someone establishing credentials before discussing something significant. She said she had been reviewing police reports associated with my address and had some questions she'd like to discuss in person. I said, "Yes, come whenever works for you." She came the following Thursday at 10 a.m. I want to tell you about the folder by this point, because it had grown considerably from the first day I created it. 47 screenshots of texts spanning 3 years, organized chronologically. A log of 11 undisclosed drop-offs, with dates, times, and duration. The time-stamped photographs from the apartment entry, Dana on my couch, the pizza, the toys, the evidence of an unauthorized entry that had been presented to me as a favor I should be grateful for. Mrs. Ramirez's recorded footage. 3 separate hallway incidents, Jordan and Kayla alone. Timestamps on all of it. Doug Ferrara's written disturbance report from the Saturday incident. My call logs showing 12 missed calls from Dana during the hallway confrontation. The voicemails, 4 of them, that accompanied those calls in which my sister told me, in escalating terms, that I was a bad brother, a selfish person, and that she hoped I was happy with myself. I printed everything and organized it into a physical file with labeled sections, because I wanted Ms. Patel to be able to read it like a document, rather than a phone screen. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and read through it in silence. She took approximately 22 minutes. When she finished, she set the last page down and looked at me with the expression of someone who has formed a clear professional opinion and is choosing her words with care. "Mr. Webb," she said, "my job is to make sure 2 children are safe, not to referee family disagreements. What I'm looking at here is a pattern, documented, dated, corroborated, that my department takes seriously." She paused. "I'm going to need to follow up with your sister." "I understand," I said. "The children appear to be safe in the long-term sense," she said. "But the incidents in the hallway, the unsupervised time, the disturbance on Saturday, these are things that require a formal response." "I know," I said. "That's why I documented them." She looked at the folder. "Yes," she said. "You did." There was something in her voice when she said it. Not admiration exactly, but the specific acknowledgement of a professional encountering work that was done correctly. "I have one question," I said. "Go ahead." "The original police call, the one that brought officers to my door the night Dana dropped the kids and left. She told them I was committing child neglect. The children were in my apartment. They were fed, they were safe, there was no neglect occurring. Is there anything in my record from that?" Ms. Patel looked at her notes. She looked at the documentation I had provided, which included the police visit as a dated entry with contextual notes. "Given the officers' account of what they found when they arrived," she said carefully, "no, there is nothing in your record." She looked at me. "The original report, however, is now part of a larger file." I nodded. She left with a copy of everything, which I had prepared in advance. 2 full sets, one for her and one for my records. I watched her car pull out of the parking structure from my window, and then I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my own apartment. The meeting with Dana happened 3 days later. I wasn't there. I was not required to be there, and I did not want to be there, because my presence would have made it about the 2 of us rather than about the documentation, and the documentation was the point. I heard about it from Dana herself, which surprised me. She called at 9:47 that evening. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard from her before. Not anger, not the performed hurt she usually deployed, but something stripped of its usual management. The voice of someone who has been in a room with a professional they cannot charm and has come out the other side. "Parenting classes," she said. "Mandatory check-ins. I have to give written notice before any drop-offs. They're putting a formal record in the system." "Okay," I said. "Marcus, you actually reported me. You involved the government in our family." I had thought about how I was going to answer this if she said it, because I had understood she would probably say it. I had thought about whether to be measured or direct, whether to explain or simply state. I went with simple. "No," I said. "You involved 2 police officers in my home. You reported child neglect that wasn't happening to get law enforcement to my door, because I said I wasn't available. I just made sure someone wrote down what actually happened." Silence on her end. "That's not, it is," I said. "That's exactly what it is." More silence. "The kids like you," she said finally. It came out smaller than everything else she had said, like she was offering it as something, a concession, maybe, or an acknowledgement that there was something between us that wasn't just conflict. "I know they do," I said. "I like them too. That's not what this was about." "And then what was it about?" I thought about the question, about how to answer it correctly. It was about the fact that you used the police as a tool to punish me for saying no, I said, and then used the kids as leverage, and then walked into my locked apartment without asking, and then stood in a hallway screaming while Jordan and Kayla begged you to stop. I paused. None of that is what family is. She didn't respond. The classes might help, I said, not unkindly, genuinely. And the check-ins. The structure might actually be good for you and the kids. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. My parents called the following Sunday, together on a shared line, which they do when they have agreed on an approach and want to present a unified position. My father opened. We heard about the meeting with the social worker. I know, I said. This went further than it needed to. My mother said. The hand wave translated into audio. Did it? I asked. She's your sister, my father said. She filed a false neglect report against me, I said. She entered my locked apartment without permission. She left her kids unsupervised in a public hallway multiple times over 2 months. And when I documented it, that documentation produced a response from a child welfare specialist who determined it was serious enough to require intervention. I paused. Which part went further than it needed to? My father was quiet. You could have handled it differently, my mother said. I handled it by writing things down, I said. That's it. I wrote down what was happening and handed it to the people whose job it is to respond to it. If the documentation was damaging to Dana, that's because what she was doing was damaging. More quiet. The kids are fine, I said. They're going to be better with the structure in place. That's the part that matters. My mother's voice when it came back was different, not the hand wave register, something more honest. We should have listened to you, she said. The first time. It was a small thing, an acknowledgement without the full weight of everything it was acknowledging, but it was real. Yeah, I said. You should have. Jordan and Kayla came to my apartment for the first time under the new arrangement 4 weeks later. Dana had given written notice 48 hours in advance, which is what the formal agreement required. She had a specific time for drop-off and a specific time for pickup, and both of them were on a schedule that I had been consulted about and had agreed to. The backpacks came up with the kids, instead of being shoved into my arms before I'd fully processed the situation. Dana stood in my doorway for a moment after the kids went in. She looked different than she usually looked. Not changed exactly, but recalibrated. The certainty she usually wore had been adjusted to something slightly less absolute. I know I messed up, she said. Not the performed hurt version. The flat, direct version. I know you know, I said. Are we okay? I thought about this. About what okay means when the answer is honest rather than reassuring. We're getting there, I said. She nodded. After she left, I found Jordan at my kitchen table, homework out, unprompted. The automatic efficiency of a kid who has learned to use available time. Kayla was building something with blocks in the living room with the intense focus of a 7-year-old with a structural vision. I made them a snack. Jordan looked up from his worksheet. You're not in trouble anymore, he said, the same matter-of-fact tone as before. No, I said. I'm not. Good. He went back to his worksheet. I sat across the table from him and opened my laptop and did some work, and we stayed like that for a while. 2 people at a kitchen table, each doing what they needed to do, in an apartment where the door was locked and the folder on my phone was still there, but hadn't been opened in 3 weeks. Some documentation you keep because you hope to use it. Some you keep because the keeping was the point. Mrs. Ramirez knocked on my door the following Tuesday. She handed me a small plant in a terracotta pot. A succulent, low maintenance, the kind that doesn't require much attention but rewards it. For the apartment, she said. Thank you, I said. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who has witnessed something play out to its conclusion and has a professional assessment of the result. Those babies were in the hallway 4 times, she said. I have the recordings. I was going to report it myself if you hadn't. I know, I said. You did it right, she said. I looked at the plant in my hands. I just wrote things down, I said. She nodded, like that was exactly the right answer. Most people don't. She went back to her apartment. I put the succulent on my windowsill in the spot that gets the most afternoon light and thought about that. Most people don't.